The honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the member's intervention on this bill. I'd like to ask him, we've raised this issue before in debate on this bill, S-5, and the matter came up recently this week in the media, where the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investment, it's a voluntary organized dispute resolution organization that was set up back in 2002, I believe. Two of the big major banks withdrew from that organization, are no longer participating in it. And the Ombudsman himself has said that that has effectively made the organization almost useless. I'd like to ask the member if he would explain what it is that his government is going to do to make sure that there is the kind of independent analysis, dispute resolution for these matters that was normally provided by this organization.
For Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question. I didn't hear that direct comment in the media at the time, but, Mr. Speaker, nothing here is invalidated, so I reject the premise of his question. There are independent bodies, as I indicated in my speech, that do provide this advice. We have, of course, in this act, in this legislation, consulted widely with Canadians as well as to what they want, including all the credit unions and Caisse Populaires. And those independent factors, those independent experts in the industry are available to us to refer to and to provide comment on this at any time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question et commentaire. The honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hope I don't waste all my good lines that I'll be using when I get up next in asking questions. But I would like to follow up further on the point that I made about the Ombudsman's organization that I was referring to, the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investments. Was an article that appeared in the Globe and Mail the 27th of March, where the organization, and I just want to say to the member that the organization was set up to provide independent complaint handling, dispute resolution on behalf of customers, clients of the banks, to deal with it in a manner that was independent, and it's been clearly stated that in fact the organization's effectiveness has been lost because two of the big banks are no longer participating, and I think that it's a problem when customers, consumers don't have the opportunity to receive an unbiased, independent review of their particular complaints. And the Minister and the Parliamentary Secretary have said on this point that, well, we're going to do something about it, but nothing has come forward. So I wondered if the member would please comment on why he does not think that an independent arbiter representing customers and consumers is not a good idea.
The honourable member for Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nobody has said that independence is not a good idea in the financial field. It is there. The Ombudsman remains in his position, and it's essentially the same question that the member asked me just a moment ago, and the answer remains the same. There is independence in this structure. The consumers still have a right to redress and recourse, and that will be provided throughout the process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I am pleased to rise and commence debate for the official opposition on Bill S-5 this afternoon. Our finance critic will be participating in the debate a little later on. It's been said by the opposition at each stage along the bill that we would be supporting it. We did try to make some amendments, which I will make reference to. We did try to make amendments at the committee stage, amendments that we thought would properly make adjustments to the various changes that have been made that would add to the bill, that would not in any way try to detract from it or cause any problems. We wanted to, I guess, ensure that the scope of the minister's approval was properly reflected and properly represented the interest not just of the banking industry, but represented and took into consideration the concerns of the economy in this country as a whole. Unfortunately, those amendments were not deemed to be acceptable, and they were voted down. But nonetheless, we recognize that this is an important process in respect to the Canadian financial system. Some would say it's represents the strength of the financial system that we have built into the law, that there will be a review of the Bank Act periodically every 5 years, that we will take time, that the government will take time to go through this process and ensure that the people that are participating in financial services in the country are being properly represented, and also ensure that the agents and the bankers, the operators, the financial institutions, Mr. Speaker, are operating correctly. And I've said in debate here in this House that there's no question that the strength and the strength of the Canadian banking system and our ability to withstand the economic chaos that besought the United States and Iceland and Europe and various other countries within the global community in 2008, that we were in a position to be able to withstand that because of the fact that we have a history in this country that's developed over generations of proper and standard regulation. And I think we saw that. There have been attempts at various times in the 90s under the Liberals. There was an attempt to deregulate the financial industry, to open it up to our financial institutions, open them up to foreign control. But that was Canadians spoke up. Canadians spoke up, and they said no, that's not the way they wanted to go forward. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to see that happen. In fact, that's the kind of thing that causes me some concern when I hear members opposite in the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party take great credit for the state of the financial system, because I believe it's not, they want to take credit for the fact that it is in good shape, but I would suggest to you that it is not them alone. It is not the people in this House that alone have decided the wise decisions, but in large part it's Canadians. It's the Canadians that send us to this place, that let us know how they feel about the way their financial system should be regulated, and the fact that they want it to be there to be less speculation and more control and more small c conservative management of the system, and that's a good thing, and that's something that we should respect and that we should acknowledge. I want to say that and we have said this, that that while this review is an important strength of the banking system, Mr. Speaker, we feel that this time around, in particular, this government missed an opportunity to make some changes that were sorely needed. We've talked about the measures to reinforce demutualization regulation to prevent predatory practices, measures that could enhance the cooperative credit movement as financial institutions that prioritize serving their communities as opposed to the short-sighted speculation and exaggerated executive bonuses, and a more comprehensive consumer protection measures. Mr. Speaker, for example, we look at the problems that are facing consumers as a result of exorbitant ATM fees, hidden fees that we find in a whole myriad of banking services. We would like to see full and complete disclosure of charges that are applied to Canadians that work with and that are serviced by banks and other financial institutions in this country. Unfortunately, the government decided not to do that. It almost feels, when I hear members opposite get to their feet and talk about this legislation, all they want to do is take credit and boast for the strength of the financial system in this country. And that's too bad. You know, this is a system that Canada should be proud of, that all Canadians should be proud of, and it's something that we have to pay close attention to make sure that we don't go down the wrong road, that we don't miss things, that we don't in fact disrupt those rules and regulations and that are in place in order to provide protection and sound governance. Again, in that regard, the member who spoke before me made a suggestion that there was wide consultation across the country with Canadians. Well, that couldn't be any farther from the truth. Mr. Speaker, there were requests for participation, for consultation. It was an invitation. It was by invitation only. There were, I believe, 32 submissions that were made, and that was it. And even all of those were not made public. That's not. And I said this the other day in debate at report stage that, you know, it seems to me when members talk about this being a technical bill, and so we just need to recognize that it's too much detail for Canadians. That shows a level of disrespect to Canadians that they certainly do not deserve. I know in Dartmouth Coal Harbour, for example, there are a lot of constituents that I've talked with about a measure like this, about the need for consumer protection, the need for greater protection against demutualization. Constituents of mine, Canadians who know a great deal about these issues. They're not too technical for them. And I know that this bill and any review of financial institutions of the Banking Act would benefit greatly. Would benefit greatly from a comprehensive, exhaustive consultation with ordinary Canadians. And maybe then members opposite would have a greater appreciation for the kinds of challenges and the kind of concerns that Canadians are facing. Not just bankers, not just, you know, bankers and executives of banks and financial institutions that are making banks that are making profits in the tens of billions of dollars every year, and executives that are making millions and millions of dollars of annual salaries and bonuses, all the while consumers find themselves at every step whenever they have contact with financial institutions. They find they are frankly being nickeled and dimed at every opportunity, and it causes some concern. And I think if we had a process an open process that provided Canadians the opportunity to share their opinions, to share their knowledge, to share their experience with members opposite, that would be of some considerable value. And it's in that regard I raised with the member who spoke before me a couple of questions, and I've talked about this in the House before, and that's my concern with respect to the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investment. It's a voluntary organization established in 2002 as a result of discussion amongst government, industry, and consumer groups to improve consumer protection and financial services. It was done so because if you look at Section 455 in the Bank Act, Mr. Speaker, it provides all sorts of opportunities to establish dispute resolution processes, but they are dispute resolution processes in the complete control of the financial institution. And the whole idea of the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investment was to have a voluntary organization that was independent. It was set up as an independent service for conflict resolution under the condition that all banks participate. And it was set up to ensure that consumers that are participating directly with the I'm just looking here for a bit of the definition, if I may, that it's to establish procedures for dealing with complaints made by persons having requested or received products or services in Canada from a bank. Now, there's opportunities through the Bank Act for each institution, as I said earlier, required to have that kind of service, and that's all good. However, what the banks recognized, what government recognized, what consumer groups recognized was that wasn't good enough, and that's why the service I referred to was set up. But again, it's not mandatory, it's voluntary. And unfortunately, two of Canada's largest banks, RBC and TD, left. They left this service, and when I raised questions with the Banking Association representative at committee, what he told me was, that's okay, because each bank has their own service. Each bank has their own individual and individuals that are responsible for dealing with complaints, and that they will ensure, and I'm not suggesting for a second that he was making any kind of misrepresentation. That's the situation, and I appreciate the fact that that's what he said, and that's what the banks are doing, and good for them. Unfortunately, it was determined back in the early 2000s that that wasn't good enough. The consumers and government recognized that, in fact, there had to be something more. There had to be an independent body. And I raised this question at committee also with the parliamentary secretary. And I was told that the minister has all intentions of bringing forward some other kind of independent service the government is going to set up. But they've been saying that now for upwards of a year. And even the banks are wondering what the government is going to do in this regard, Mr. Speaker. So it's all about independence. It's all about consumer representation. It's about fairness. It's about ensuring that consumers, in fact, have the appropriate representation as they're dealing with the banks. Because, like we said, the financial institutions in this country operate within a regulatory framework that provides them with a great deal of protection, against competition, against challenging of services and so on. But unfortunately, it doesn't provide consumers with the same level of support, frankly, Mr. Speaker, that I and my colleagues on this side would like to see. Now, I recognize, as I said before, that the government has gone some distance in fulfilling their responsibility to conduct this review. But the way they did it, they waited until this fall. They knew that this review was coming forward. But they waited until the fall to bring forward this bill, S-5, and they didn't introduce it here in the elected chamber for debate and discussion. They introduced it through the Senate. Not to say that the senators would not have had an opportunity and had some valuable input in that, but this is the elected chamber. This is where legislation should begin, at least, I would suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, because we've been imbued with the concerns and the wishes and the advice of our constituents, and we bring that to bear. Bring that to bear in debate, and that's what we were. We did not have the opportunity to do that. So the bill was discussed and debated and went through some process within the Senate, and we didn't see it until, I believe, it was early in this year, or was it in February? We haven't had much time, in other words, to deal with it. We know that it has to pass through here by April 20th. By April 20th, in accordance with the regulations. So, if there had have been matters that were particularly egregious, then we would have been accused, if we had have put up a stink, if we had have wanted to engage in lengthy debate, that it would have been suggested to us that we were, putting the whole process in jeopardy, and the deadline was going to be missed, and so the pressure would have been on. We did not, of course, have the opportunity, as a result of the way that it was introduced, we did not have the opportunity to have a fulsome discussion with Canadians, to have a more fulsome discussion on the amendments that we wanted to introduce to this bill as a result of the timelines, Mr. Speaker. And that's unfortunate, and I believe that very much underlines the way this government tends to view this chamber, tends to view the democratic process. We see it here, we see it in committee. The government is in a hurry. And while they were only elected by 39% of the population, they feel that every Canadian out there believes and accepts and agrees with everything they say, and they will not tolerate any conflict or any discussion or any opposition, and that's unfortunate because, Mr. Speaker, as you know, 60% of Canadians did not vote for what the Conservatives brought forward, and in fact, 72% didn't vote for you. And in fact, a lot of what the Conservatives told Canadians in the election assured them that they would not attack their pensions, for example. They are now attacking their pensions. The government made commitments about attacking services, that they would not do that. Well, guess what? They're doing it. They've been doing it. They've been attacking public services. The budget's coming down tomorrow, and we're going to see firsthand, Canadians are going to see firsthand, that what the government said to them in order to get elected is turning out to be completely the contrary. And that, Mr. Speaker, is another slap in the face of democracy. And that's the kind of issue that we've been dealing with. I understand that my time is up, and I appreciate having had the opportunity to participate in this debate.
Avant que nous commencions.
Before we begin the question and comment period, it is my duty, pursuant to Standing Order 38, to inform the House that the questions to be raised tonight at the time of adjournment are as follows. The Honourable Member for Scarborough Rouge River, Post-Secondary Education. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan, Aboriginal Affairs. The Honourable Member for Windsor West, Canada-US Relations.
Comments? Questions et commentaires? L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Brossard-la-Prairie.
I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his speech and also for his great work. It's a pleasure to have him in the Finance Committee, and he's been a very good addition to us, and especially as a Deputy Finance Critic. I just wanted to ask my colleague, we know that we haven't had much time to look at it in the Finance Committee, and also we deplore the fact that the government really improvised on that. Can my colleague tell me what the government could have done better in order to protect consumers in terms of banks? Thank you.
For Dartmouth, Cole Harbour.
Well, I thank the member for his question, and of course, the member is the co-chair of the Finance Committee and our critic for national revenue, and has been doing an extraordinary job at staying focused and keeping us all focused on those important issues. I spoke earlier about the fact that I thought this government could do a lot more. We thought this government could do a lot more in areas of providing for consumer protection, in terms of ATM fees, in terms of full disclosure for bank charges, making sure that the Ombudsman and Financial Services Organization was properly established. As I mentioned, right now the organization is basically about to be disbanded, according to the Ombudsman, because two of the big banks have pulled out, and those are the kinds of consumer protections that I believe should have been dealt with here in this bill.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments?
The Honourable Member for Malpeque.
Mr. Speaker. In the main, I enjoyed the member's remarks, Mr. Speaker, but he had a fairly major error in his remarks when it came to talking about the previous Liberal government's position on the banks. He indicated that we wanted to deregulate the banks. We did not. In fact, we ensured that we didn't. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I sat on a committee of, at the time, of Liberal backbenchers when the whole bank merger issue and the banks themselves, the CEO of the banks wanted to expand into the U.S. And merge with a lot of the American banks, which would have put us in the same kind of turmoil that the Americans had befallen. And so I sat on that committee along with quite a number of other colleagues across the country, an internal committee. We held hearings across the country, met with the banks, and we made recommendations to the previous Prime Minister Chrétien and the Minister of Finance Martin, and they accepted our recommendations, and we did not allow the banks to deregulate. That's why we have the sound financial system we have today, that Mr. Harper tries to take credit for. I mean, the Prime Minister tries to take credit for.
It's okay.
The record for the member in that case.
Very good.
Well done.
Cole Harbour.
Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the comment made by the member from Malpeque, and the point is that under a great deal of pressure from within and from without, the government that he refers to was forced to back off from that decision. We're forced to back off. It's as a result of Canadians standing up and saying to that Liberal government, no, we don't want you to go in that direction, that they finally came to their senses and recognized the right way to go, Mr. Speaker. And that's, again, why I have concerns over whether it's the Liberals or whether it's the Conservatives try to take credit for a system that's developed over generations, that's developed as a result of standards that Canadians have said we need to support and ensure that they stay in place.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened very carefully to the comments made by my colleague since his competence in the area exceeds my own, and I would say that I find his criticism on the lack of or the little public consultations conducted. I think they could have done more than make a few phone calls, but in reading the different documents, what I'd like to know is have his opinion. In fact, if I make a comparison, even if sometimes comparisons are not always exact, at one time we had decided to separate the church and the state and saying these two things shouldn't be in the same basket. And when I read that the decisions with regard to major foreign acquisitions will now be done based on ministerial approval, rather than the superintendent of financial institutions. I think here we're coming back to the starting point, and these two things should not be in the same basket, and I'd like to have some clarification on the member's position on this.
Honourable member for Dartmouth, Cole Harbour.
Thank you very much, and the member's absolutely correct. It's a concern that we raised, me and my colleagues on the committee, and likewise in debate in this House, concerns that we raised with the Minister, with the Parliamentary Secretary, and with members opposite, that we were concerned with the level of involvement of the Minister, that the fact that the final decision was going to be left with the Minister with absolutely no constraints. In fact, we suggested on a few occasions that we needed to introduce at the very least the conditions, more broad conditions that related to the economy of this country, that related to the circumstances facing Canadians, that the Minister would have to take into consideration when they were making this decision. But unfortunately, the government has decided that the Minister is going to be right and is going to have all power in this respect.